Well, all right, friends, let's cruise straight along into the next presentation. This next one is on small-scale recycling projects with Dr. Deepika Mathur. Did I get your name right this time? Yeah, I got Chancey Pache's name wrong already twice now, so I'm trying to do the right thing. Dr. Mathur is a research fellow for the Northern Institute, College of Indigenous Futures, Arts and Society at Charles Darwin University. And this is a presentation based in the Alice Springs campus and researching and examining ways of making waste management and regional and remote areas more sustainable. So if you wouldn't mind putting your hands together and welcoming Dr. Deepika Mathur.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Before I start, can I just start with acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Larrakia people, and from where I come, the Aranda people. And I'd like to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Okay, now this title is different from what's on your program, because when I started preparing, I thought that's what I want to do. I want to find small scale recycling solutions which might be appropriate for remote communities. And in the process, I did find some. And this is like, and I was looking at international examples too, looking at developing world, looking at small um, remote areas. And so this was one which was on, using plastic bottles, and they made a wall out of it. Then you have pavers that they make, crushing the plastic using sand as binder and then making pavers and using them. But what was very clear is that we can't really adopt and take solution and cherry pick them from other places and use them in other contexts, because these places, they might be small scale, but they have economy of scale, they have cheap labor, and they're not regulated in the same way that we are in Australia. So we have our whatever manufacturing we do is under regulation, and the product that we make again has to pass through very stringent regulation before, and certified before we can use. So we can't just start manufacturing paving bricks in our backyard. And especially for our Northern Territory, which is even more unusual than rest of Australia, those solutions have to be so specific. And if you look at the distribution of the communities, I mean, it's very different from the East Coast and Southern states. So we can't forget about international examples. We'll be hard pressed to even look at examples that are being used in other parts of the country. And of course, we do have to, despite all that difference, we do have to align with the national waste policy and the national action plan. And that's where the problem comes, because at the moment, Australia is promoting and pushing for circular economy models of that. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we have international obligations, and at the moment, the global call is for circular economy, and we are talking about how can we make production more efficient and consumption more efficient. And we make these beautiful diagrams, which are extremely seductive and attractive. And my background is in architecture, and I love nice diagrams. But I think we have to go beyond these diagrams. And so my whole thought process for today's talk was that, are we asking the right questions, or are we just looking at solution and going back and framing a question for that? So are we looking at how do we manage the waste that's produced, or are we just looking at how to achieve circular economy? And the answers to both are going to be very different. And so if you go back to how the circular economy is represented, I mean, of course, it's a global call. We have big international established organizations like European Commission and Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I think Gail was mentioning that yesterday. And for them, it is all about sustainable growth, but economic growth. And where can we, and through that, they kind of promote that it is going to be a ever replenishing nature-like growth where there are no residues, there's no waste, there's very little leakage in the whole process. And the examples that we are given is that if we design differently, For example, like mobile phones, so if we design for them to be reassembled, so you dismantle and then you reproduce and you use it to produce more phones, then what's going to happen is there's going to be less materials that are going to be used. Then there is going to be less carbon emissions, which is all fine. But in this race for zero growth, zero waste, what we forget is the inherent problem that is in therefore planned, they all have planned obsolescence in the phone. So they're not going to last. So we are having a lifestyle. We're not ready to compromise on the lifestyle that we're having. And we change our phones every 2 years, whether we recycle, I mean, and then we feel good that we are recycling them. So you're not reducing the consumption. That is not going in any conversation. And all we are trying to do, how can we better recycle them? So again, there are certain assumptions that are lying this whole concept of looking at waste in this way, and which is that it's a seamless exercise. We've heard enough presentation where we discussed that for Northern Territory, it is not a seamless exercise. It is very difficult to collect, to store, and then to recycle. Where do you take them? How do you take them? So it's not really an easy exercise to do. Universal applicability. So it's assumed that this is the best solution and everybody can do it in the same way, regardless of where they are. And what is even more bothering, that it has a moral position on it. So if you're not on this concept, then people almost frown that, what do you mean you don't believe in circular economy? I mean, it's no longer an issue about waste and recycling. It takes another dimension to it. So I'm going back to the old model, which is fortunately still in the waste policy. And I'm kind of wondering why we are pitching at the fourth option there, which is recycling waste. Why are we not looking at the top two? Why are we not looking at avoiding waste, reducing waste? And then seeing how do we do the first bit well, so we don't really have to do so much of recycling. And once I'm coming now to the Northern Territory and the remote councils, and can we do this whole process in a different way? Can we think about the problem differently, not look at the solutions, but what is the problem that we are facing? And that problem has to be relevant to the remote communities, and they'll all be different. So we're not looking at one problem, we are looking at several problems, and each and every council has to frame that properly. And what is the priority? Is it legacy waste? Well, how do we deal with legacy waste? Then that becomes a problem, and you look at ways of dealing with it. Is it all the waste is coming to an island community and nothing is leaving? Is that the most important thing, or is it a particular material that you are struggling to deal with? So till that particular concern is not identified, you won't find the right answer. And the NT guidelines already do talk about this. So it's not something new that I'm saying. The guidelines for small communities is saying that every community is going to have a different problem, but we forget it in the larger discourse that is presented to us. And of course, there is a big silence because remote community actually don't not fit into that seamless cycle of growth and discard and again reuse. So we sit in an uncomfortable space, and that's why the discussion on our problems is really does become marginal. And so what are the effects? So sometimes we get caught and we just start looking at recycling everything. How do we recycle? How do we achieve circular economy? We forget the huge economic and environmental cost. I mean, the transport cost is one, but imagine the emissions that we are creating with that transport. So is that the best solution? And we do not look at any other solution. There might be solutions that are not popular, but might be the right one for your particular council. And so we just, as an academic, I would like to disrupt this and try and see, are there other ways? Can there be different solutions for different councils? And can there be multiple solutions? You don't only have to do a part, and you can see what fits best, or maybe a combination. And so I'll go to what Hemo has been talking about. Maybe litter was the problem in this community, and they addressed it through the tidy towns. So it was a small question with a small answer. We're not trying to solve world's problem at all. perhaps metal is the problem in that, and you look at metal recycling for here, and recycling might be the best way, but we find out how do we get rid of this particular waste or this particular problem. Um, Perhaps it's diverting the organics or the food waste. And we should not forget that we do need to work with the local communities as coming from larger, I can't say city, larger town of Alice Springs. We do have this habit of trying to tell people what to do. But if you're not taking the people along on the journey, then you're not getting anywhere. And I think it was Emma Clay from East Arnhem Land in a couple of presentations back. She was talking about that the people didn't understand why we're trying to recycle. And it's only when it was explained to a certain section that this is what we are trying to achieve, and this is why we are trying to do this. Most of the people were quite happy to come along and help in achieving those. And of course, you have to have the right environment, whatever that might be in that. We might even what was earlier called incineration, but now it's got a better, fancier name of waste to energy. And you can do that in small scale, kind of setups. It doesn't have to be a large one, which is for the whole couple of regional council. It might be a smaller one. It could be that we just close the landfills and what Chris was saying, and move it to transfer station and achieve some kind of scale. But over and above all of this, I think the most important point that I keep coming back to, that if we are not asking the right questions, we're not going to get the right answer. Thank you.
Knock this out of the park real fast kind of vibe. It's exciting. We'll have to maybe warn them that lunch might be a bit earlier, Meredith. It might be worth giving them a heads up, unless people want twice as long for lunch. Well,